Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX05, and EX5 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be the brand new Fanglongmon deck, or if you just want to call it something a little bit different, it's going to be the Divas and Sovereigns deck. But as far as what the deck is actually doing, it's not a super complicated deck to build, and it's not a hard deck to play either. Most of the cards are going to be coming from EX5, and in terms of its actual playstyle, it is a hard playstyle deck. So that means that we're going to be basically just playing our cards directly onto the battlefield, and we're not trying to line up some convoluted evolutionary chain to try to optimize and maximize our Digimon. Our Digimon are already pretty decent because the idea of the deck is the fact that we're playing high-level Digimon, so if the opponent doesn't have the ability to deal with them, then we could kind of just run away with the fact that we have some pretty effective high-level Digimon we're just going to be slamming onto the field. The Divas have this ability to be able to cycle through itself while also setting up another Deva in our raising area, so that way we could try to play out our cards as efficiently as we possibly can. And we're going to want to sit on our level 5s because we could utilize them in combination with the Sovereign Ace cards to be able to Digivolve during the opponent's turn to make our cards even more effective and efficient. We could also just hard play them or Digivolve up into them normally if we really wanted to, but the goal of the deck is to set up your Fanglongmon and utilize Fanglongmon, whether we're hard playing him or evolving into him, to be able to be our win condition, dealing lots of damage and having some good field control all at the same time. The biggest weakness of the deck is the fact that it just isn't the fastest deck around, and the fact that we do need to hard play a lot of high-level Digimon means that we're giving the opponent a decent amount of memory to be able to respond with, and if they do have a response, then we could kind of just get blown out because our strategy isn't going to be very effective. Then we are playing a decent amount of Ace Digimon, and Ace Digimon are their own liability just because of how they work with the overflow mechanic. But outside of that, I think it's going to be a really fun and interesting deck to mess around with. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitamers, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Mother D Reaper. So the deck isn't able to utilize traditional Digitamers, so might as well just run the best non-traditional Digitama that we have. So Mother D Reaper actually has a lot of different boons for the deck, making her really effective just because we want to take advantage of A, her color identity, B, her stat line, and C, her immunity, making sure that she's always going to be on the field. So the 15,000 DP actually is really decent to be able to absorb the raid ability, while also being able to be used with various other abilities as well, like Alliance. Next, on to the level 3s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Sister Mont Blanc. So Sister Mont Blanc is a very cheap card for us to use, especially in the early stages of the game, to try to cycle and filter through our deck as best as we possibly can. We only care about her on-play ability to be able to trash 1 card from our hand and draw 2 for that added consistency. And then we're not going to be running any level 4s in the deck. We're instead just going to skip straight to the level 5s, which is going to be the main meat and potatoes of the deck. So all of the EX5 Divas have this on-play ability to be able to draw a card and then set up a Diva traded Digimon with a different name as one that's already in the battlefield or our trash, so that way we could cycle through our deck and be able to line up whatever Diva we feel like we want at the time into our raising area, so we could move it out and continue the pressure and to be able to play out our cards a little bit more efficiently. Then each of the EX5 Divas will have a different inheritable ability based on the color. Black is going to have blocker, green is going to have piercing, blue is going to have gaining a memory when we attack, and red is going to have security attack +1. But each of the different Divas do have a different native ability, adding to the overall utility and toolboxing potential of the deck. So I'm going to be running 1 copy of Makuramon, so that way I can try to at least interact with the opponent's Tamers in a way where during the opponent's turn, all of the opponent's Tamers with a play cost of 2 or less can't suspend, so it really limits what Tamers are able to utilize their abilities. Then I'm going to be running 1 copy of Katuramon. So Katuramon is going to be the basic blocker of the deck just to try to stall out the opponent. Then I'm also going to be running 2 copies of Sinduramon. So Sinduramon is going to be the protective backbone, having decoy for Devas and for sovereign traded cards. And then the only non-EX5 Deva that I'm going to be running is the 2 copies of the EX4 Intilamon. So we do just want to run a whole bunch of different named Devas, and we don't want to run any duplicated names, and EX4 Intilamon is better than EX5 Intilamon. So EX4 Intilamon does have that alliance ability, so we could use this in combination with basically any other Digimon that's going to sit on our field, including our Mother Reaper, for Intilamon to be able to absorb its DP to make the attack as safe as possible, while also gaining security attack +1 to be able to deal as much damage as possible as well. Then it also has a secondary ability where at the end of the attack, if we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, we get to recover 1, allowing us to have an additional way to be able to keep us in the game as much as possible. And then the inheritable ability isn't too bad either for some added control, where at the end of the attack, if we have another suspended Digimon in play, then we get to have one of the opponent's Digimon gain -2000 DP for the turn. But we do have more level 5s that we're going to be running because we're running lots of level 5s. So I'm going to run 1 copy of Kimbarimon. I'm thinking about bumping up this card to 2 just because its draw ability is really important at trying to help with the overall consistency, because it triggers during all turns. When an opponent's Digimon becomes suspended, then we get to draw a card. Then I'm going to be running 1 copy of Vikarlamon. So Vikarlamon isn't the greatest Devas. It's mostly in here just because of its trait and its name. So what this card is doing is when it deletes an opponent's Digimon and survives the battle, we get to unsuspend this Digimon. This ability has a ton of applications, but it's not necessarily the greatest for what this deck wants. But something that the deck does want is going to be 2 copies of Vajramon. So Vajramon has this nice ability to try to make our options as tempo efficient as possible, where as long as he's on the field and we play an option that costs 1 or more, we get to gain 1 memory back. Which is why I'm also going to be running 2 copies of Majiramon, because, well, the more the merrier on being able to reduce the cost of our cards, making them as tempo efficient as we possibly can. And then to round out the level 5s, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Mihiramon. So Mihiramon isn't another great Deva, but it's still pretty decent at just being another named Deva, as well as trying to control the field a little bit differently by allowing us to attack the opponent's inheritable sources when we play a Digimon. Then I'm going to be running 1 copy of Sendiramon. So Sendiramon is another control tool where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 5000 DP or less when it gets deleted. So it wants us to be aggressive with this card or sacrifice it to certain abilities. Then we're going to be utilizing that same type of logic with Pajiramon, where it's not controlling the field in any way, shape, or form, just making us a little bit more efficient as long as the opponent has a Tamer in play when this Digimon gets deleted. And then Indramon is the best of the red ones just because its on delete ability allows us to draw a card, making the deck that much more consistent. And then when it comes to the level 6s, I'm just going to keep it simple and run a full 4 Sovereign lineup. So the cool thing about all of the 4 Sovereigns is, well, they're 2-color Digimon, so we could use them on top of their colors that's being represented, or because we're playing with a whole bunch of Devas, it doesn't actually matter what color they are, just because we can Digivolve on top of any level 5 Deva we want for a little bit more efficient of a cost, as well as the fact that all of them are Ace Digimon, so they all come with the hand counter Blast Digivolution, giving them more flexibility. but I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ebonmormon Ace. Even though this is arguably the worst of them, he's still not that bad, allowing us to be able to have extra ways at dealing with Digimon if we can't necessarily delete them outright. So his on-play and when Digivolving ability allows us to be able to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon down for each of our 4 Sovereign and Deva traded Digimon on our field, and then during the opponent's next unsuspend phase, all of their Digimon can't unsuspend, buying us some extra time to be able to make the pushes or plays that we need to. Then he has an on-delete ability to be able to delete one of the opponent's suspended Digimon, which is okay, but it's definitely not as good as the other 3's on delete abilities. So I'm going to run 3 copies of Fanglongmon Ace. This is probably the best of all of the 4 Sovereigns, just because his on-play and when Digivolving ability allows us to be able to bounce one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon back into their hand, and then we also get to unsuspend one of our Digimon with Deva, 4 Great Dragons, or 4 Sovereign in their traits, which that unsuspend is good both offensively and defensively. Then his on-delete ability allows us to delete the opponent's Digimon with the highest level. And then I'm also going to run 2 copies of Zuquaimon. You can kind of play around with the ratios between Zuquaimon and Bahumon, but I do like what both of them are doing nonetheless, and I do prefer what Bahumon is doing over Zuquai, just because Zuquaimon has an ability where when we Digivolve into it or when we're attacking with it, we get to delete one of our Digimon with Deva in its traits or has 6000 DP or less, and then this Digimon gains security attack +1 for the turn, allowing him to hit even harder. This isn't that great in my opinion, just because we're not really wanting to delete a whole bunch of our Digimon just to try to deal some extra damage. But his on-delete ability is still pretty decent, allowing us to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the highest DP. And then I am preferring to run 3 copies of Bahumon, just because I do want to try to utilize his ability to help us flood the field a little bit more, where during the opponent's turn, when a security is checked, if that card has Deva in its traits, we get to play it without battling and without paying its play cost. So even though they get the free check, we get a free body, and we could use that free body to line up another ace and make even more powerful plays possible, which is why I really like what Bahumon is doing. And then his on-delete removal ability allows us to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the highest play cost. And then when it comes to the level 7, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Fanglongmon. So Fanglongmon is going to be the most expensive card in the deck because he is a secret rare in EX05. But at cost of the card regardless, he's still just a really solid card at being the deck's win condition. So he has the ability to Digivolve on top of any of our 4 Great Sovereigns for 4, but he does have an on-play ability and when attacking ability where we get a return up to 4 cards with Deva or 4 Sovereigns in its traits from our trash to the bottom of our deck, and then for each one, all of the opponent's Digimon get minus 4000 DP for the turn, so we could use this ability to control the opponent's field rather effectively. Then he even has a nice secondary when attacking ability, where for each one of our Digimon with 4 Great Sovereigns and its traits in play, we get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So the more 4 Sovereigns we have, the more damage, especially free damage, that he's going to be dealing, allowing us to try to utilize this ability to win the game with. Then he has a third ability where during all turns, this Digimon isn't affected by effects of the opponent's Digimon. It's still affected by their options, but the fact that it's still very hard for the opponent to be able to remove this is still really valuable at being able to make sure we could keep our Fanglongmon as healthy as we possibly can. And then when it comes to our option lineup, we're just running something relatively simple and efficient. So I'm going to run 4 copies of Loyalty Deeper Than the Sea. So this is going to be one of the key digging tools, and we could use this card relatively easily because we're playing some white Digimon, as well as we could use this card as long as we have a Deva or 4 Great Sovereigns in its traits in play. So what this card is doing is just digging through the top 3, adding a Deva or 4 Great Sovereign in its traits among them into the bottom Digivolution source of one of our Digimon, or add one of them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. Then we're also going to be running 4 copies of Holy Beast's Great Cardinal Positions. So this is going to be the card that allows us to try to play our Fanglongmon alternatively, where as long as we have a card with Deva or 4 Great Sovereigns and its traits in play, then we get to ignore its color cost, and we get to reduce its cost by 1 for each of our Deva and 4 Great Sovereigns with different names that are in our trash, subtly incentivizing us to try to fill up our trash, both passively and actively. Then its main ability allows us to be able to play a Digimon with Fanglongmon in its name from our hand for free. Then its security ability allows us to return a Fanglongmon in its name from our trash back into our hand and add this card into our hand so it can line itself up. Then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Heaven's Judgment. So Heaven's Judgment is a very easy card for us to use just because we do have some decent green Digimon that we're going to be playing around with. We also have some yellow Digimon, so it's not like the color requirement is going to be that hard, but the fact that it rewards us for utilizing a whole bunch of different colors is really nice because for each color we get to activate this ability to be able to have one of the opponent's Digimon gain minus 6,000 DP for the turn, and this is one of the few decks that actually can play with all 6 colors, taking full advantage of what this card can do in terms of its removal potential, while also being pretty okay out of our security, just minusing 12,000 outright. And then when it comes to the Tamers, I'm just going to be running 4 copies of Analog Youth. So Analog Youth is another cheap white searching tool to be able to add any Digimon into our hand off the top 3, and then we get to trash the rest, which, as we know, off of Fanglong and off of Cardinal, is not really a bad thing at all. Then it also has a nice secondary ability that we could kind of use, where during all turns, when one of our level 5 or higher Digimon with a Digivolution source gets deleted, we get to suspend this Tamer and be able to gain a memory and hatch an egg into an empty space in our raising area. That hatching the egg part isn't necessarily super relevant, but the fact that a lot of our high-level Digimon do have the overflow means that we could use this to try to mitigate overflow as much as we possibly can. But that's pretty much it for the deck, and I think that even though in the EX05 environment, it's not going to be the best deck, it's not the worst deck either. It does have its good matchups, but it also has its bad matchups as well. And there's still just a whole bunch of other useful cards that we could think about utilizing in the deck, mostly cards that are just really decent generic Tamers that are interacting with level 5 or higher Digimon. We also have cards that want to help us interact with our raising area. We do have some other level 7s we could kind of tech in, and we do have a whole bunch of Devas, Sovereigns, and cards that are interacting with our Devas and Sovereigns as well. And then as far as some potential future upgrades, well, unfortunately, there's not really any direct support for the known future, but what we have is what we're going to have to work with until more support tries to come in the form of indirect support, mainly coming from new options, Tamers, and various other tech cards. And we're probably going to be seeing some more Devas come out in the future. I don't necessarily know if we're going to get any more 4 Great Sovereigns, but regardless, there's still just a lot of potential that this deck has, even with the limited amount of future support that we know about.